All right, Mark, since it's now 1 o'clock, do you want to go ahead and get started officially?
Let's do it. Yahoo!
All right, cool. Well, good afternoon, everyone, if you're on the East Coast. Good morning if you are on the West Coast or somewhere in between. Thanks for being here for today's webinar, Donor Retention Begins on the First Date. And my name is Stephen Shattuck, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. And just some housekeeping items before we begin. Just want to let everyone know that we are recording this presentation, and we'll make that recording available to you a little later on this afternoon. I'll send that out as well as Mark's slides in case you didn't get them earlier. So look for an email from me a little later on today. And as you're listening today, please feel free to use that chat box right there on your screen. We would love to hear your questions and comments. It's always fun when the Q&A session is a little interactive. So don't be shy about that. Mark will be here. We'll save some time at the end to answer questions, might even answer some questions as we go along. So don't be shy about that at all. We would love to hear from you. And just in case this is your first webinar with us, welcome. We do these webinars every week, usually on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And in case you aren't familiar with Bloomerang, in addition to offering these webinars, we also have some donor management software. That's our core business. If you're interested in that, if you're in the market for that, we would love for you to check it out. You can learn more on our witbsite. But we won't talk too much about that today because I want Mark to talk to you about donor retention. So I want to go ahead and introduce Mark. Marc Pitman, thanks for being here today. It's always lovely when we have you on for webinars and podcasts and blog posts. So thanks for doing this for us.
Wow, lovely. That's so much nicer than what Roger Craver called me. That's good.
Oh, you're our favorite. You're a fellow New England native. I think the last time you were on with us, it was 2 years ago, and we were both kind of bummed out that the Bruins just lost the Stanley Cup. But hopefully, I think we're both in better spirits.
And was that the hangout where I had the TARDIS behind me on the screen?
No, that was a different one. So yeah, a fellow Doctor Who fan. You're just one of my favorite people, Mark, and I want to brag on you for just a minute, if I can, in case folks aren't familiar with you. Which I don't think is too many. But if you don't know Mark, he is the author of Ask Without Fear. Excellent book. He's the founder of fundraisingcoach.com, and he's also the executive director over at the nonprofitacademy.com. You should definitely check out all three of those things. Great resources. He speaks all the time. He speaks around the world. He's been featured in Al Jazeera, Success Magazine, Fox News. He's also a pastor of a church. He manages a gubernatorial campaign. He also teaches internet marketing and fundraising at colleges and universities. Just kind of a renaissance man. He's got 3 super sharp kids who are all artists and musicians. And I just learned he's going to be moving to for you. You might want to say hi to Mark. He'll be wearing a beautiful bow tie, I'm sure. So if you see him, say hi. Mark, I'm not going to take any more time away from you. Why don't you go ahead and tell us all about donor retention?
I would be glad to. I'm a little concerned about the bow tie in the Greenville, South Carolina heat. I'm not sure how this New England boy is going to be able to, if it's going to be untied.
Yeah, I didn't think that through.
Or not. Yeah, no, it's been. My wife keeps telling me central air conditioning, Mark. Everything's air conditioned. So great. Well, I am thrilled to be here. I'm really excited that you guys are in on this, and if you're a CEO of an organization or an executive director, please just type yes in the chat. I'd love to see how many of you guys are that. The chat is off to, yeah, there you go. So there are some of you here. Great, that's awesome. What I am thrilled about is that you guys are in such an interesting position as the head of the nonprofit. The board has hired you to do a job that statistically we'll go through. You don't often know the fundraising part of it, and then the staff expects you to have the answers for it, and you're navigating this really interesting way. And I just want to hats off to you, and we're going to help you do that well. Because one of the things that I got to do is work with CEOs. I was doing a CEO survey that was asking, what are the top 5 things that frustrate you about fundraising? I would cold call people, and it was fascinating because people were more than willing to get these things off their chest. Let me tell you what frustrates me about fundraising. What the most common phrase that I heard was in this survey was, "I don't ask on the first date." So people had all different issues. But one of the things I kept hearing was, I don't want to ask for a gift on the first date. And my fundraising people want me to go and ask, but it's a first date. And this is what I want to just kind of plow into this for the rest of our time together. It sounds reasonable. So if your CEO is saying this, or if you as a CEO are saying it, or you have a board chair that's saying, well, we shouldn't ask on the first date, it totally sounds like you're taking the moral high ground. You're really thinking about the donor, it sounds like. You really are thinking about respecting them as a person, which is what we learn in donor retention. We need to do that. It sounds like it, but the results of it, what it really results in is months of trying to get a follow-up appointment. And I'll show you a little later how a bank CEO actually uses the lack of an ask to stall for 18 months. So as hassling as it feels like for us, it really hassles the donor too with our repeated, hey, we just met, now we want to ask you for money calls. And it leads to decreased donor retention because, first of all, to retain a donor, you have to get them as a donor. You got to make an ask. You can't retain something that you haven't caught or received. And then it also has decreased funding. It's more expensive to raise money from people that you have to talk to a couple of times. So for those of you, I feel like who's heard me speak before, you know that I'm a firm believer in the basics. Like any good coach, you need to know the basics. And so the basics of fundraising, we're going to review this and show it in the context of why asking on a first date is actually a very good strategy for some fundraising. I teach the process of asking for money as real. Gen Xer, I heard get real growing up a lot. So the R stands for research. The E stands for engage. The A stands for ask. And the L stands for love. And then you just complete the loop again. So you research your prospect. You research everybody thinks you research your prospect, but you should research your goals first. So one of the ways that we do that is through a case statement, which is basically if you are asked to argue in front of a court of law for why people should give to your cause, boom, you should be able to answer that right in your case statement. You should have your statistics, your reason why you're a good investment. You should also have your heart stories. Who are the people, the lives that you're changing? What is the land that's being conserved? What's the art that's being promoted? What is what kids are being fed? Any of those things. What pets are being protected? Those heartwarming stories, as well as the statistical stories, go into that. Why I teach people this is we've really moved away from the case statement. And I don't know if you listen to Joe Garrick at all, the Fundraising Authority. He has some really good things about a case statement too. But one of the things case statements do is causes you to stretch beyond yourself or to reimagine what's possible. We get so caught up in what making do with less that we forget that we can also do things that may be more possible for us as well. So that it helps us to dream big. As you're working through your case statement and you're adding on all the different projects and things that you're doing and the different funds that you're fundraising for, you can then start tallying up how much does it cost to do that, and you can use a gift table to do this. This is giftRangeCalculator.com is the one that I have free. There are other gift calculators on the site, on the web. Working with a developer right now to have this put as a app on a phone. But basically, this is just an easy way of looking at stuff that we've studied since World War II. The first gift into a lot of campaigns needs to be 10 to 25% of a campaign. The next gift needs to be something like 7 to 15%, and then I think it's like 5 to 10% for the next two. So I just went more conservative on mine. Gift Range Calculator is the one that I created. And if you can look across the top here if I get the right marker out. The first gift is $25,000, I say, because it's just as hard in my experience to ask someone for $10,000 as it is to ask them for $25,000. So I like to ask for the bigger amount because they don't tend to ever double their gift as much. Most donors tend to take your ask as the top and then work down if it's too high for them. The other good thing about asking high is that people don't seem to get offended. I even had a board member say this to how surprised he was that they didn't get offended with him when he asked too much for what he thought was too much. They may be flattered, they may still say no, but then they may come in at a lower level than this. So if the first gift is $25,000, and you need one gift to do that to raise $100,000, then you need 3 to 5 prospects. That's something that we've also seen. And so you start building your names list. So this isn't an Ask Without Fear session. This is just a basic on how we go about doing this. The reason I go over this, though, is that oftentimes when I talk to CEOs in particular and fundraisers, they forget to know how much they're fundraising for. When I ask somebody, how much do you want to raise, the most common answer I get is more. Wish we had more. We could do more if we had more. And unfortunately, you can't write a check for more that's cashable at a bank. You need to have a specific dollar amount. So doing this kind of research can be very helpful. The last part of that is then going into your naming opportunities. You can look back at the gift range table and say, okay, these are the gift levels. What would, if we were to label a name, put a name in here for the 25,000, what would we call it? And what would we call the 15,000? I guess one thing I do want to mention on the gift range calculator is don't get stuck here. If you don't have someone that could give 25% of your goal, that doesn't mean you can't have a successful campaign. Andrea Kilstead is very good at saying some donors will have a smaller donor database and will need people to give higher percentages, and some will need to give lower. This is just something to help your planning and to especially take excited board members through an exercise to help them build the names list while they're still excited. All right, so then you can have naming opportunities. Those could be your different giving funds. Those could be spaces that you could name. The research goes on to research about your prospect. What are your tools? You could Google it. You could use magazines. There's Katja Andreessen in her book, Robin Hood Marketing, talks about ripping out all the ads from newspapers that your donor or magazines your donors read that you see lying around their offices or homes and putting them up on a wall and just looking what are the messages that the companies are investing billions of dollars of research into targeting these people. What are the messages they're trying to get across? So you could use magazines to do that. Then you could also use paid firms like Target Analytics or Wealth Engine or Donor Search that will look through your database. And Steve, are there any companies that work particularly with Bloomerang?
Say that again, Mark.
For donor research, what are the companies that Bloomerang works well with to
Donor Search. Donor Search. We have a close personal. We have a product integration with, so you can get Donor Search
awesome.
right on Bloomerang. It's pretty
well.
Cool.
Then, if you're a Bloomerang customer, then definitely use Donor Search. It blows me away. I just love the way that they look at wealth and propensity of giving because that's something that's really important. The big thing in the research step is being realistic. We can get really slap happy and think, oh, all these people have money. I've talked to a lot of people lately that say, wow, they could just write a check for our entire budget. And, well, they're not going to. So you got to be realistic about that. And the other part is to avoid paralysis by analysis. As I've been talking with CEOs in particular, really ones that are new to the idea of having to ask for money, they want just a little bit more information. They want a little bit more of the donor profile. They want a little bit more to know a little bit more before they go into that meeting. And understandable, but you need to move beyond that. So the engage step is probably the most neglected. And this is where people that think that they're not asking on the first date think they're moving into the engage step. So that's why it sounds so good. This is the dating part. Seth Godin talks about this in Permission Marketing, about where we get to know I would say donor instead of customer, and they get to know us. We get to find out more about them. We get to find out what their interests are. We get to find out what aspect of our nonprofit would be the most likely to resonate with them. All too often what we do is just translate. I think about my local United Way. We are always trying to figure out how do we package all the 27 different things that our United Way does, plus all the partner agencies, in a way that donors will be most likely to act and make a gift, but also get the full picture. And what we need to do is try to get ourselves away from trying to educate people to get the full picture, because that just isn't going to happen. What our goal has to be, especially in major gifts, is getting to know what's the right aspect for the person to make the next step. And as they get closer in relationship to us through donating time and volunteering and donating money, that's where they'll start learning more and more about our organization. What we also want to do in this step is we really want to show donors that we know that they're not our ATM. I feel like when I teach fundraising like this, I'm a donor protection unit. I'm helping protect donors from bad asking. This is a picture I got in Portland, Maine during the Occupy protest. I saw this guy on a rainy day with it out there, and I almost caused an accident as I tried to pull in front of the post office in Portland. And I bounded out of the car. I said, "Can I take a picture with you and put it all over social media?" He said, "Yeah, go for it." Donors want to know that they're not our ATM, and that's why having that gift chart can be helpful because you're showing the roadmap. You're showing the donor, I don't expect you to give the whole project. If you'd like to, we would probably not be opposed to that, but we have a plan for reaching the whole goal. That typically, in typical fundraising, that leads up to the ask. So the ask is, what is the number one, everybody in your chat, what is the number one reason why people don't give? Put it in your chat. The answers that you think. Right, Bree, you win. I don't know what you win. The good feeling of the virtual gold star and everybody else too. They're not asked. It's fascinating to me that people do studies. Very good at it. They're all pouring in. This is great. The number one reason people don't give is they're not asked. And even though every year our universe is based on a fiscal budget and we need annual donors, and every year we think we're asked, we think people should know that they need to give to us. You'd be surprised at how many people try to imply that they need gifts, or hoping that people will infer just by being in their space. In fact, I was doing a training and I went head to head with a senior VP of fundraising of $100 million organization. That fundraising isn't what we need to do as fundraisers. No donor needs another good friend. They need to be connected with something that furthers their values and is a good investment. So that's where the ask happens. The number one reason is people don't ask, but this is really where the magic happens. And this is what more of our donors are ready for than we expect. To finish up the real step, and I'll explain that in just a few slides. Finish up the real step after we ask them and we answer their objections. If they don't say yes right away, if they say yes right away, what do we know? We've asked too low, probably. So but that's good. At least they said yes. It's easy to thank them, and we have systems for gift acknowledgments and when we should call them and when we should report back to them. Bloomerang has that baked into its system of who needs to be touched again. So the live and like. The reason I have it live, love, and like, and live is that donors are easy to. Most donors, it's just easy to love them. Every communication after this becomes filled with gratitude. Thank you so much. Even the next solicitations can be communicated through gratitude. Some people we don't love, but we can like them, or at least like the action that they have. But we're not in like corporate sales. We can't just burn through relationships. So even the people we don't love or like, we still have to live with. There are still the crazy Uncle Harrys in our universe that we just have to put up with. And so that is part of stewardship, because even if they said no, the reality is most no's are not permanent. They're no's for now, not no's forever. So I say that in this slide too. This business is all about relationships. We really need to keep that relationship going. And if we handle a no well, we may be ready for them when they're flushed or feeling like they're ready to give again. We may be on a short list for them because we actually kept in touch with them and we didn't just write them off. So this is how it feels. This is what the steps that the CEO wants to go through. He wants to go through the research step, the engage step, the ask step, and the love step. Each step in an orderly sequence. What he doesn't, so it totally makes sense to not ask on the first date, because it seems like you're skipping a step. You're jumping from researching, where he's just learning about the donor, to asking. Oh, that seems so rude, so inappropriate. But we got to take an ego check. Whether it's you, the CEO, you, the fundraiser, you, the board member, you're not the center of the relationship. These steps here are not about you. It should be about the donor. All about the donor's relationship with your nonprofit too. So let's look at it from a donor's perspective. She's already done her research, and the nonprofit's already done research about her. She's probably, before you got there, she's had relationships. She may have given already. She may have volunteered. There are things that she's done in the space with your nonprofit staff, and she's even been asked before. And you don't want to leave her hanging on the ask. You got to ask there. So let me put it this way. Think about it so the CEO isn't here for the research step or the engage step. When it comes to the ask step, the CEO is often trying to start right here because the CEO or executive director is brand new to the organization. So this is where that I don't ask on the first date comes in. So what we need to do is, and so much of fundraising is getting ourselves, it's counterintuitive. It's getting ourselves and our nonprofit out of the way of a donor making an impact. And so as a CEO, leader of an organization, as the chief fundraiser or the person making the ask as a volunteer, we need to get ourselves out of the way. And even though we haven't necessarily been experiencing these parts of the relationship with the donor, we have to, if it's true, we have to know that the donors had that kind of relationship with our organization. And we want it with the organization so that it's not dependent on any one employee. So if the donor is here, we want to be able to meet there and make the ask and not leave her hanging. So let me tell you about a CEO that actually loved being left hanging. I was doing a feasibility study in Massachusetts for a campaign. And like so many feasibility or planning studies, you go through, you talk to donors, you try to you try to find out what their donors' perception of the nonprofit are, try to figure out what their perception of the case statement is, how much they may give if they were to be asked today, who else they think should be there. In the midst of doing that, I was talking to this guy, and somehow we started talking about not giving on the first date. And he said, I never understood this. As a bank CEO, my time is really limited. And I know the value of the CEO of the fundraiser or the executive director of a nonprofit's time. They're doing important work. Their job isn't to entertain me or to make me feel special. Their job is to carry out the work that we love for them to do. That's why our bank loves giving to them. So when I see one, I'm expecting to be asked, he said. What he found out would happen is if he didn't get asked on that first visit, he knew, and he had it calculated, and he had an 18-month game plan for stalling on getting the ask. And it could be that this, I understand this is a little different maybe because it's corporate, but I'll show you another link where it's also happens for individuals too. But he said if the CEO, happened to be a guy for this organization, if he came and visited me, and I did, and he says I'll follow up with you in a couple of weeks to talk about a project or something that we might want to talk about investing in. The CEO of the nonprofit would say that. This bank president would say, okay, fine, but when he got called again, he'd tell a secretary, we just met. I feel comfortable with their vision and mission. I understand where they're going. I don't need to see them again. And he put it off for a year and a half. He totally felt like he had dodged a bullet. And what's annoying about that, and there was another capital campaign I was in where the kind of refrain always was, I'm not going to ask on the first date. And if the executive directors forced their staff to do was the thankless ask of following up. It's hard work and discouraging when somebody, in the best of circumstances, it can be hard work and discouraging once you finally got an appointment with somebody on the calendar to then wait and try to find another time again to do that. A lot of capital campaigns have two-step asks. You meet with the donor, you let them think about it, and then you make the solicitation in a second meeting. And not everybody wants that. So we have to be donor-centered. What is great about it as a CEO and executive director, for those of you who fit those roles, is if you make an ask, you're saying, I see you as the donor having a relationship with our organization, and that's wonderful. We're so grateful. Without you and people like you, we wouldn't be here today. You're doing such good work. Would you consider doing that with this gift, whatever it happens to be? Then instead of nagging or having your assistant nag or your fundraising staff nag to try to get a second appointment for an ask, you get to let your calls be all thank yous. Thanks so much for your commitment, and everything gets to be out of gratitude. Those are so much more enjoyable than having to try to follow up to make an ask. You start feeling like the desperate person that can't get a date when you're trying to get the ask. It's much better to be able to get the ask out of the way and move forward. Now, expressing gratitude leads to increased donor retention. We've seen that, and increased revenue. So I know there's going to be a question on ask on first date. So I'm just writing that down, and I know Steve's also moderating questions. We'll have time for that after too. But before I do that, I want to show you some statistics on increased revenue during the thank yous. Michael Rosen split test a group of donors for a hospital. And I have never worked with an organization that had the guts to test like this because they never want to risk alienating a group. But if you're not thanking people consistently now and you continue not thanking a group of them, they won't know anything's different. So it's not like you're really alienating them in reality. So Michael Rosen had the guts to try this. He just had a very simple split test. All hospital donors, he split one into a group that got one additional thank you call, and he split the other one in the ones that just got the regular kind of setting that he'd gotten already before. The group that got the thank you calls generated an average 68% more revenue that next year. And I'll leave this up here. I know you'll have the recording, but you'll see this too, that funChat.org/2014-0321/03. I won't read it out because that's awful. But that's where he talks about this. That report is shown. Would you like to have a 68% more revenue from the same donors? One of the problems with our nonprofits, or one of the organizational systemic problems, is that we're so focused on acquisition and trying to find who's the new money, where's the new money coming from. We're always going to the same people. But part of the reason we go to the same people is the same reason that companies look for repeat customers. It's cheaper to go to the same people, and it's more rewarding for everybody. You're developing a relationship. You're finding out more about each other. You're increasing the role of their commitment if you're doing it well. So I just love these kind of statistics where 68% more revenue was generated from the people that got that one thank you call. Oh, great. Looks like the link was just put in there too in the chat. So if you want to click over to that and then come back here. What I think is really behind that, I don't ask on the first date, I really think there's something about, it's really fear at the bottom. The CEOs I've heard it from may not say, many of them are self-aware enough that they would say that it's fear. But Compass Point out in the Northwest did a study called Underdeveloped. And one of the things that it reviewed thousands of organizations and nonprofit organizations, CEOs, development directors, and tried to find they did a research project on what's wrong, why is there this crisis going on in fundraising and funding nonprofits. Part of it was that they found out that 25% of CEOs just said, we don't have the skills for fundraising. We don't do this well. Another 20%, 1 in 5 CEOs, said they don't even like doing it. I think that's probably even more. Based on the experience I've had in coaching people, I think it's more than 1 in 5, but good for those 1 in 5, those 20% that said, I don't even enjoy doing this. I know it's part of the job, but I don't like it. For me, I think fundraising is an incredible privilege. It's like we get to go up and down the wall of our nonprofit with those different plugs, and this mindset may help some of you get beyond that first date. Or if you're going to share this replay with someone who needs to hear this, is instead of thinking you're bugging someone or you're popping the marriage question on the first date. It's not about that at all. It's that the donor is the electrical cord, and your nonprofit is an outlet. People work 40, 60, 80 hours a week to create money. And they often, at one point, they had these values and ideals that they wanted to do, and then they get into this work thing. And for a lot of us, we just our work moves us away from what we really our ideals. And philanthropy is a way to match our ideals back up with our work, because as we search the different outlets in our nonprofit, some of them are, the three-prong ones. Some of them are these funky appliance ones. Some of them are these kind of weird face-looking ones. There are some that are kind of like Christmas tree type ones in New Zealand. As we look for those and try to find which plug the donor fits best in, that's when we start really being donor-centered. Why I put this one right here, this one is a 1950s type plug that has 2 prongs, but it's not the same as the grounded prong on this side, where one prong is wider. And I love this picture, because sometimes we look at a donor and they have a 2-prong plug. And so here in the United States anyway, and I think North America, sorry to my Canadian friends. And in Europe, just trust me, this works. But when we have a plug with two prongs, we sometimes will have a grounded one because it's now 2015, but we may have an old house and we try to shove it into this type of outlet, and it doesn't fit. It just it won't, or it goes in really, really tight. And we do this with our donors all the time, don't we? We find we have one pet project or one matching challenge or one something that we're really excited about, and we miss all the cues that the donor doesn't care at all about that and would much rather give it into some outlet that looks like this. Maybe we're focused solely on a capital campaign and they're interested in giving to a scholarship that's not part of the campaign. Or I had one guy say, we had all these naming opportunities in the campaign, and one guy said, "Who's funding the pipes?" That shocked me. I said, "What?" "Yeah," he said, I do pipes and I want to see the blueprints. Who's funding the pipes? Nobody cares about the infrastructure as much as they care about the shrubbery and the exterior. So, hey, we'll find a way to get into those pipes. And then when we do, boom, it's magic. The lights go on and the joy is that we see in donors. And it's not all of them, but when we make the ask and we do it well, that's part of what can help us get over that. It's not the idea that we're asking on the first date. First of all, we have to see that it's not the first date for the donor. Second of all, is that we're not taking from people, we're actually adding to people's lives. Another thing that we need to look at is just the statistics of giving. And I'm not going to apologize for this being basic, because it's the basics that are amazingly important in our field. This is the most recent, stat. I love sharing this with boards. There are 4 basic income sources. What is the biggest one? Invariably, people say corporations and foundations that haven't studied this. But out of the giving of $358 billion last year, you guys know this because you're on this call. Not only was it individuals, but individuals and bequests. Because as far as I know, even though the Supreme Court says that in the United States corporations are equal, corporations don't tend to give bequests as far as I know. So somewhere around 82% of that $358 billion that was given by people like you and me, maybe with deeper pockets, but there are people like us. And that's another reason why we want to be able to ask on the first date, because this is where most of the money comes from. It really does come from our people like our board members and others. So I think I'm going to be starting to wrap up. Load up your questions, because we would love to, I want to make sure that this works for you. I don't want this just to be me fire hosing people with information. And I know I speak at about 400 words a minute with Gus up to 600, I've been told. So I want to make sure that you understand what all we're going through. But just look at the process. We research, we engage, we ask, and we love. And if you're a CEO hearing this and thinking about not asking the first date, you just have to trust that your nonprofit's been researching and engaging to some level, and that the donor feels like there's some level of relationship, particularly if they've made a donation. If they've already made a donation, then you can start from the perspective of thanking them, even if your thank you is an ask. One of the easiest asks to make is, you did such great work. It's not about, you don't even lead with the nonprofit, but you just say, your gift made all of this possible. Your gift, and those are, people like you made all of this possible. Would you do that again over here? Just, would you do that same behavior? You've already done the behavior. I'm not asking you to do something you've never done before. Would you do it over here? So, but it comes out of this whole idea of gratitude. Now, this is, if you're not the CEO, here are some ways that you can help your CEO get over it. First of all, is do the research yourself. Honestly, many of us, one of the dirty secrets in fundraising is most fundraisers, according to Underdeveloped, not most, but 25%, I believe it was, didn't have the basic fundraising skills necessary. So do some basic background research. Show them a profile of the donor. Put it on a nice piece of paper of their name, their address, their contact information. If they don't have access to the Bloomerang database, which they should, sometimes the database picture can really confuse people. So sometimes just having it as a kind of a little one-pager, or a one-pager with verifying information from Zillow or the Forbes bio or whatever, the bio from their latest theatrical production in the community theater, whatever it is. And then show your CEO or executive director the engagement that's happened already. Let them know, hey, look, we know that you haven't met with them before, but boy, they feel really close to this organization, or they've had these touches. And with a normal major gift officer, somebody that had these touches, we would be ready for the ask. Because that way you can lead her to your CEO to the ask, and you could prep her by saying, here's the research and engagement, and here's what we think might be a good area for this ask to go through. This is the type of thing that this donor has expressed interest in. One of the things that I love about it on the Bloomerang blog, so I don't know, Steve, if you could put that in there too, if you can type fast enough, bloomerang.co blog was 7 things nonprofit leaders should know about mid-level donors. But many of our organizations, we have the top donors, we have a lot of small donors, but we don't have these mid-level donors. And this blog post on Bloomerang's site, part of the reason we don't have the middle-range donors could be that they look like low donors to us. They don't raise their hands in the ways or do the things that we associate with major gift donors. But one of the characteristics that is explained in this blog is that they're actually ready they're much more prepared for an ask than others. So they are not offended by being asked for $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000 gift on their first visit, because they already feel like they've been doing their own engagement in their relationship. So check out that. Thanks, Stephen, put it in there so that you have that in the chat session also. And then work with your CEO so she could see that building the relationship out of gratitude is far easier than trying to earn the right to ask a donor, especially to earn the right that's already been earned, because the nonprofit's been doing great things. If you're wanting to participate in the survey, the CEO survey, please feel free to go to fundraisingcoach.com/CEO-fundraising-frustrations, and you can do that yourself. But I'd love to know, what are your thoughts? Does this resonate with what you were expecting or what you've experienced in your own asking on the first date type scenario? You could use the chat. What has been your most effective ask, Monica asks. I don't quite understand what you mean by that. Could you explain some a little bit more in the chat? Aw, that's very nice of you, Chairperson Stevens. We all get afraid to ask, so I'm not trying to. I hope you heard there was no snark in this presentation. I wasn't trying to insult people. Fear is a normal human tendency, and it's actually probably one of the reasons why we've lasted so long as a species, because we're afraid. So it can be really good. So I don't quite understand what your most effective ask means. I know, I think it's Dave Dunlop, a mentor of mine, has one of my favorite stories of his was his most effective ask was asking there's a guy that he talked about huge gifts. He was in the stratosphere. He'd run a program at Cornell to be mega wealthy, which is great. But there was one person who could have given a 6 or 7 figure gift, but never did. And so he finally made his first ask. But whenever they were talking with this prospect, it was always about his private jet. He's always so proud of his private jet. So Dave finally figured out, that's my first ask. There was a period where the university president had a lot of appointments in different places and the schedule was tight. And so he went to this prospect, Dave went to this prospect and said, I don't know if this is possible, but our president has this really tight schedule. Could he use your jet? Boom. The donor felt heard, felt loved, was glad to be able to do that, stayed on the jet with the CEO the whole time. I mean, how much would you love to get some of your top prospects around your senior leader? And just cemented a relationship that led to, I believe, a 7-figure gift. So sometimes the first ask doesn't have to be for money. It could be for time or for some use of a space. That can be very good too. Okay, so Lori's asking, many donors are meeting with do not have a past history of engagement with our organization. Would this change your approach? Well, it depends. I don't think it would change my approach, but I think this wouldn't necessarily be for them, in part. And the typical consultant answer is it depends. I would check to see how badly your organization needs funding. I think I've heard this myth. I feel like it's a myth in my experience that it takes 12 to 18 months to grow a major gift donor. I've never put a donor in a pot of soil and watered fed it Miracle-Gro to see if it would grow. I just know that I don't know where people are at if I don't try and ask. What I'm fed up with, and one of the biggest regrets I have in my 20 years of fundraising is how many times I've tried to take the decision making out of the hand of the donor and make it myself. What it looks like is walking away from a meeting that I knew I wanted to make an ask in, and I tell people that I report back to, the timing wasn't right. People need to be. I have really recommitted over the last many years now to treat donors like adults, and if they're not ready to give, I will know when they tell me that they're not ready to give, and that could be a very straight ask. But it could also be a very honest ask of, hey, look, I don't even know how much to ask, what the right gift level would be, but would a gift of $7,500 be in the ballpark? Would that be the right way to go? There's something about, I love honesty and integrity. Anybody that's heard me say, knows that I say honesty and integrity are some of the best fundraising tools in our toolkit. I'll keep looking at these chats, and Stephen, feel free to highlight any that, because it's going pretty fast. I'll look at these questions, but I wanted to explain the slide on the screen. One of the other things I found, and the underdeveloped found, but I've also found in my CEO survey, is that most CEOs and nonprofit staff feel like their board isn't engaged enough in fundraising. They're really frustrated with that. So I wrote a book on 21 ways, just a book, 21 ways that board members could get engaged in the nonprofit's fundraising. People are actually printing this out and using it now as part of their board orientation and saying, all right, take two, because introverts can be good askers, extroverts can be good askers, people that have homes that can entertain can be good askers, people that don't have homes that can entertain can also be good askers. There's a whole bunch of different ways that people can be good ambassadors and supporters of the organization, and that. Oh, thanks for putting it in there. So if you just go to nonprofitacademy/Bloomerang, you'd be able to get a free, you know what, I'll even send you a free session on the asking conversation from the Nonprofit Academy. I'll probably be able to do that tomorrow or so. But if you sign up for this book, make sure you get to see Andrea Kilstedt has a whole hour-long or a 75-minute long training on exactly what to say and when to say it in a major gift solicitation ask. And what's surprising, what I know from experience, but I love seeing in her training, is a lot of the time there are significant sections of the time where you should be quiet and listening to the donor. All right, so, somebody's even got italicized and bolded here. Have you ever asked on the first date and had the potential donor be upset and offended? Of course. I mean, I don't think you're doing your job if you're not getting some people upset and offended at you. Because your job is not to make people feel good. Your job is to raise funds for the organization. Fortunately, the overwhelmingly best way to raise funds for your organization on a sustainable basis is to have people feel good for you. But feeling good isn't the goal. Raising funds is the goal. We're fundraisers. We're not feeling gooders or feeling good raisers. We're fundraisers. And if you didn't know it, just check out my blog post. For those of you that are listening to this live, the blog that's most recent on fundraisingcoach.com has a abbreviated quote from Wesley, the Princess Bride, where he says, "Life is pain, Your Highness. Anybody telling you anything else is selling something." Well, I changed it a bit to nonprofit life is fundraising, Highness. Anyone who's telling you, it says that differently, is selling you something. Nonprofit life, whether you meant it to be or not, is by its definition fundraising, because you need money to be able to fund your mission. So, you definitely have people that get offended. And if they get offended, apologize. I mean, two of the biggest words I was told by the priest that did my premarital counseling, two of the biggest words that would save my marriage is, "I'm sorry." And I've made it 3. I'm so sorry. It's probably, I say those on a daily basis, and so far for 20 years of marriage last month, it's working. And I mean it. You have to say it with sincerity. I never advocate being insincere, but just apologizing up front. Wow, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that this would offend you. Can you tell me more about that? Or when would be a good time? One thing to ask, I think it's Vanessa asked that. One thing that I like to do in my training too is or in my asking, is if I'm on what I think is an engaged step and I find out, holy cow, they love what we're doing. I had no idea. I will, what in sales they call it a test close. I'll test their readiness to be asked. So I'll say something like, wow, Vanessa, I didn't realize you were so passionate about sending kids to camp. We happen to be raising money for that right now. Could I tell you more about how you could invest in that now? Or no, I didn't come here to talk. This is what I like to say. We happen to be raising money for that now, but I didn't come to ask you about or talk to you about that this time. That's the stage. I'm going to ask you about it, but that was not why we set up the call. But could I talk to you more about how you could get involved in that now, or would it be better for me to follow up in a couple of weeks? So instead of just coming out and making the ask, you can test. Is this a good time for us to have that conversation, or would it be better to wait? It could be better to wait because you might want to get their spouse or partner there. There may be other things that could happen. There could be a sale of something that's happening that would make it so it'd be a little bit more advantageous to wait. That could be based both on your research and just based on their telling you. Donors are really open to telling you things. If this isn't a good time, you'll also find, so this is the other thing, if you find that it's not a good time to ask because they get offended, which I've just, usually that is more fear than reality. I think I've had one or two people in 20 years get seriously offended, and most of them know they know the deal. Donors understand that nonprofits need to ask for money. So if they do, though, you could then say, well, when would be a good time to ask? Sorry, did not realize you were going through that right now. 2008 might have been a bad time to ask car dealers for a large gift. So that would be something that you'd just say, I'm really apologize for that. Is there a better time in the year that I would ask? And people will tell you. Somebody's saying that they're a one-person shop, which is a lot of us, and they're training themselves and the board to ask all the time. We're all afraid to ask. Good for you. Sort of like coming to grips with it. This is another thing, Stephen. I don't know if you've seen this work well, but where people, I love telling people upfront, being upfront with people. If you're nervous, let the prospect know that. If you go there to ask, and the person, if they feel your tension, they're going to think it's their own intuitive, ooh, maybe I shouldn't give to this. But the minute you say, Joe, I'm sorry, I'm just really scared. I knew fundraising was part of this. I don't feel comfortable asking for money. First of all, that'll let them off the hook. They'll realize all the negative juju in the room is from you. So they'll just, okay, I can clear that. I don't have to worry about is that my intuition or not. And then they may even start cheering for you because you know what? They don't want to ask you either. They wouldn't want to ask either. So they may actually be rooting for you. Come on, you can do it. And then you can just flow into the whole, but the cause is so important that I wouldn't be doing it justice if I didn't invite people to invest in it. And I'd really like to ask you to consider a gift of $1,000. And part of what I found makes that helpful also is talking to your steering wheel before the ask, rolling over that asking amount, making sure you have a direct dollar amount in your ask. I'd like to ask you to consider giving X. And you could break it up into $1,000 a year or $84 a month are the ones that most nonprofits think are major gifts. But whatever it is, practice it. And then or the beginning of major gifts, I should say. Stephen, I was at one training and I asked people in the room, there were a few hundred in the room, I said, what do you define a major gift as? And it went from everywhere from 500, a low of 500 was the starting major gift level for one organization to 500,000 for another organization was the starting major gift level for them. I've not been in that stratosphere that often. It's sort of like the orbiter that's going out past Pluto now, but it's good to know that exists. So that we all go to that someday.
Hey, Mark, I wanted to pull out a question from Peter here. if you got
Before you
time.
do
He's
that, I
saying
like
that.
what Janine is saying. Is fear is exactly true. That's what fear is actually an acronym. False evidence appearing real. Most of the time, we let our imagination go nuts, and that's what fear is. And it's just as likely as all the positive things that could happen. So we have to harness in our imagination. But go ahead, Peter had a question.
That's really true. Peter here, he had a comment and a question. He's a new individual giving coordinator, and he has been working on classifying their large donor pool. And he says, since this process includes a meeting with the purpose to meet him as a new employee, should he also ask in those meetings? So it sounds like it's just kind of a get-to-know Peter meeting rather than necessarily asking them. And a lot of those people that he'll be meeting have already given at least once. Maybe they've given recently. Does that count as a first date in your mind, or should he just kind of keep that as just the purely the meeting?
I think it sounds like there's a structure for it being okay for that, and if they're already giving, that's great. If the nonprofit's short on cash and they've lapsed, they're like beyond the 12 months or beyond whatever you feel is current donor for your organization. I mean, it's a blend of the organizational funding needs, the donor relational needs. Adrian Sargent's research indicates that the best time to ask a donor for the second gift is often within 90 days. So we have this artificial need to put it off for 12 months. And I'm also a big fan of multi-year pledges. So if they're paying off their pledge payments, it is totally legitimate to get together with them. The Veritas Group guys talk about how doing that process is figuring out who wants to have the relationship. They say for a major gift officer should have about 150 people assigned to them, but it will take about 450 people to get down to that 150, because there's for every one person that's willing to have a more closely knit relationship with the nonprofit, there are two other people that giving at the same level that really aren't looking for another best friend. And that's no harm, no foul on anybody. It's just you need to know that so that you don't bug them also.
Right.
So I think he's fine. He's fine making those gifts if he comes across and says, hey, occupational hazard, I am a fundraiser, you know that. This is something that we're really committed to, then could I ask you now? But I think there's an integrity, and if you're just meeting someone to get to know them, that you just leave it that. Sort of like there's an integrity if you're just thanking someone, that you just thank them. You don't turn it into an ask at the end.
I agree.
Oh, good.
Mark, there was
a Veritas Group plan. I thought it sounded Veritas Group like. Good for you, Peter.
They are great. Good job, Peter. Hey, Mark Sangita here was wondering if you could define transitional giving versus mid-level giving. It sounds like maybe they're not too familiar with those terms. Could you kind of break those down?
I'm not really familiar with them either. I don't know if I use them.
Transitional giving I don't know either.
Well, there's transactional giving, and philanthropic giving is something that I've used in a couple other sessions, but not today. Basically, I don't think we should get too caught up on the dollar amount because each organization is different. And I think many organizations, especially younger ones, could actually think bigger. We tend to ask too small, and people and we won't know if we're asking too small until we start getting some donors saying, "Whoa, what financials are you looking at?" And then we'll know maybe we asked too big on that one. But I think we tend to underprice ourselves. One of the questions I was first asked as a fundraiser was, what would it cost? I was working at a college at the time, and so the trainer said, what would it cost to rename your college? And we all tittered and laughed, ha, 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 ha. And they said, no, this is serious. What would it cost to rename your college? And it would be an enormous sum of money. And that's where you should start your naming opportunities and gift asks from, not from what little does it cost. I was working with one group that was trying to figure out naming opportunities based on cost per square footage of building. And it's not a transactional, you're not buying something like that. It's not like you're buying a widget. Giving is tapping into something that's foundational to humans, and it's tapping into generosity. There's a higher value in a gift than just buying a computer program or a hard drive.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we've probably got time for one more question, Mark, because I want to give you a minute to talk about some of the other things you've got going on. Maybe we could end with actually a couple people asked a variation of this question. Nancy kind of asked it in one way, and she says she's a brand new foundation director. She needs to move fast. What should she do first? And a lot of other people asked, what's my first step? Maybe deciding what people to ask, what people to invite out for coffee. What's a good first step for maybe a new organization?
I think this is good because another person said, could you go over the 4 stages again? And I'll use the question for this one, because part of the problem is that you start freaking out because what Underdeveloped showed and what I'll be teaching in a session tomorrow is that many organizations aren't doing the fundraising, so they hire someone, an executive director or a fundraiser, to subcontract the funding, and they expect the funding to happen immediately. And it doesn't always happen immediately, especially if the system has been broken for years. So I think what the fear part that gets into us is we got to produce right away, so we just start asking. And we'll raise more money if we start asking than if we don't. But I think it really starts with what you're alluding to, Stephen, of figuring out what is it we're asking for. What are the different, if we were a store, what are the different boxes of cereal we could have on the shelf? How much would they cost? What aisle would they be in? What is our case statement? What are the levels of giving strategically, not just because we have a history of $1,000 donors or $10,000 donors, but like I was talking to a conference yesterday, one of my coaching clients, and it turns out that they should have a $20,000 sponsorship level based on the cost of the conference. So great. And it turns out it was neat because they had already worked to asking for that. And then when we took a step backwards and looked at the research of their pricing and the 10 to 25% lead donor thing, they realized, oh wow, this fits perfectly. They hadn't done it last year, but they're going to do it this year so that they can have more money going to other things, not just the catering. So I think if your first step could be taking an afternoon, giving yourself permission to look over your database. One of the things I like to do if you have one is look at the top 20% of all-time givers and top 20% of last year's givers and just see, there are usually names that pop out at you. And there's another very small nonprofit in rural Maine here who's a member of the Nonprofit Academy that I recommended. He didn't know where to go, and the board had burned through a lot of donors relationships. So I said, go back. How far do you have records? He said 7 years. And he kept saying, I don't have a lot of people to go to. So we'll go back all 7 years worth and say thank you. You're thrilled to be the new executive director, and you wouldn't be here if they hadn't exhibited generosity at some point in the past. And you'd like to share with them a couple of cool things that are happening. Build those relationships. Let people know that you care. And
I love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that's a good thing to end on, I think. And Mark, I know you've got a couple exciting things happening starting tomorrow. Is that right? Do you want to talk about?
Oh, I would love to, actually. Thanks for the opportunity. I knew that this was going to be recorded, so I wanted to keep it as evergreen as possible. So this offer, the free ebook and the introduction to how to ask for money, the free preview of how to, you don't get a preview of the webinar. You get the whole webinar. I'll make sure that happens to anybody that signs up through this link. But tomorrow, what is today, the 15th? Tomorrow on the 16th at 1, I'm doing a whole, I thought it would be an hour, but I think it's going to be an hour and a half, unpacking the underdeveloped study. For the last 18 months, I've had university leaders, religious community leaders, and other leaders, CEOs and board chairs, and people asking me at leadership summits and at in Vegas and in Chicago and in DC to unpack this study called Underdeveloped, look at the research behind what was found in the study, but then also how do we implement this in our organizations to make changes so that we're not lurching from debt crisis to debt crisis, but so that we're not lurching from one failed fundraiser to another failed fundraiser. 50%, part of the study showed something like 50% of CEOs want to fire their fundraiser and 50% of the fundraisers want to quit. There's a lot of dissatisfaction in our system, in our field right now. So I'm going to be unpacking that, and I'm really thrilled about that. That's if you go to crisis, CRICS, .fundraisingcoach.com, you can sign up for that. It's only $20. The other cool thing that I've started doing is for the last 10 years, I've been teaching board members. Just one of the things that happens with board members is we don't educate them. So none of us really grow up knowing about fundraising. So how would we expect our board members to engage well in fundraising? So I have a 3-hour board training, and the first hour of that is called Fundraising 101. I've taken that out and put it into 3 video classes with handouts and assessments and a guide on how to how to host a successful cultivation or fundraising party in your home. Minute by minute what you should be doing, and that's at 101.fundraisingcoach.com. So that's been helping people I know around the country, around North America. I've shared it really around the world. I've been able to do some trainings in other countries too. But I'm really excited about that because I can't be everywhere, and it's more expensive to bring me places. But the price of the course has just been really freeing people up. And it's really cool, Stephen, as people are asking, can I just pay a little bit more so I can make sure I can show this to my board? Because it was meant for board members, board members and CEOs. It was almost like, I don't know what I'm doing. Could you please give a course for me and keep me anonymous? So that's why I created it. But it turns out that people want to share that with what they're learning with their organization. If you get that, you get the assessments, you get the video lifetime access to the video, lifetime access to the assessments, and you also get access to a forum on Facebook where you can ask questions. And we had some really good questions about government funding and some other questions that aren't dealt with in this. I deal with philanthropic giving, but it still it helps board members make smarter decisions when they realize where the money really comes from and what it takes to get it. It's not just throwing up a page on Indiegogo and expecting the money to pour in, or not just funding, hiring a fundraiser and not realizing it's going to be an expense to the bottom line before it's a revenue producer. So thanks for letting me talk about this. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, and Mark, I'll link to all that. I'll send everyone the links to those. I would definitely recommend that you all check that out. Mark is one of our most trusted providers of educational content, so we definitely recommend everything that he puts out there. But Mark, this was really awesome for you taking an hour out of your day to join us, so thanks so much for sharing all your knowledge with us. Really
it's fun. A topic I love, so thanks for asking me. I love it. And for anybody, I'm available on Twitter at Marc A. Pitman if you want to do that, or just my email is marc@fundraisingcoach.com.
Cool, and thanks to all of you for taking an hour out of your day to join us. We really do appreciate it. Like I said, we do these webinars every week. There's lots of resources on the Bloomerang website, our daily blog. We've got some downloadables, our newsletter, Bloomerang TV, our podcast, which Mark has been a guest on, so you can maybe look for Mark's episode there. And Bloomies, the Bloomies are our award for outstanding donor communications, so we do a little case study every Friday. So check that out. You may get some ideas there as well. Next webinar, really excited about. Mazarine Trays is going to join us 1 week from tomorrow, so that's back on our usual Thursday. Oh yeah, she's awesome. She's going to talk about how to fundraise on a small budget. So if you're a small shop or a new shop, definitely check that out. That's another free webinar, and we'll have some other ones out in the future that you can register for as well. So it's about 2 o'clock. I'll just say a final thanks, and look for an email from me a little later on. I'll be sending out the recording and Mark's slides once again, as well as links to all those resources he talked about. So thanks for joining us, Mark. Thanks again. Have a good move down to South Carolina, and
thanks,
hopefully
everyone.
We'll have you back on. Yeah, and thank you all for listening. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll hopefully talk to you next week. Bye now.